This is The Download from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Newton Shuttlecotty.
And I'm Gavin Gaddis.
The Download is brought to you by Podscribe. Find out more at podscribe.com.
This week, the hidden cost of ad skipping, brand safety on PMAX, the future of web browser regulation, and the anticlimax of cookie degradation. Let's get started. This Wednesday from Todd Webster at Sounds Profitable. With talk of ad skipping and automating the process in the air, Tom takes some time to look at data that shows what skipping an ad actually does to podcasting. Sounds Profitable's latest study, Ad Nauseam, is built from consumer perceptions of advertising in podcasts. The survey collected responses from 1,000 weekly podcast listeners. When asked if they believe skipping ads affects their support of a favorite podcast, 59% of respondents pick, "No, it doesn't affect my support." A quote from Tom Webster, quote, "3/4 of podcast listeners don't believe or know that ad skipping hurts their favorite podcasts. I find this disconnect highly unusual because we know from multiple sources of data that people do make positive connections between the brands that advertise on their favorite podcasts and the support of those brands for their favorite creators. So the positive aspects of that linkage are clear to listeners, but we haven't made the corollary case here. If that support is taken away through skipping brand messages, it can actually hurt the creator." Now, I am not saying we have to go insane here as podcasters about how we talk about ads, but at the very least, maybe we can talk less dismissively about them. Every time I hear a podcaster toss off a comment like, "Well, it's time to pay the bills," a puppy dies somewhere. At the very least, we can actively show gratitude and encourage our listeners to at least hear the ads out. End quote. The issue with ad skipping is podcast advertising truly works, as has been demonstrated repeatedly over the past decade plus. There is no one monolithic reason, such as "I just hate podcast ads," that motivates listeners to hit that 30-second skip button. Destigmatizing the ad break will go a long way to help rectifying the idea ads are the podcasting equivalent of eating one's vegetables. Ad nauseam respondents find podcasting is doing a good job at finding a balance of advertisement to content, and the industry is doing a good job of finding the right ads for the right shows.
This Wednesday, from Ad Exchanger's Optimizing the News newsletter, Google has announced several small new updates to their Performance Max platform. One change brings third-party brand safety tech for YouTube ad placements. A quote from the newsletter, quote, "Advertisers still won't be able to see exactly where their ads are served, or even what they looked like. Buyers have to trust YouTube and the vendor's assurance that the ads met brand suitability standards. But placement reporting could serve as a general barometer for how much a campaign has been served on YouTube." End quote. So, while third-party vendors will report if an ad ran in a brand-suitable environment, advertisers still won't be able to see exactly which videos their ads ran on or what the ad looked like. Which ultimately means the advertisers have to trust their vendor, YouTube, and the integration between the two. A sticking point for advertisers, and one podcasting is familiar with as the industry pushes for further transparency in every transaction. Transparency that buyers are demanding.
This Monday from Digiday's Ronan Shields. With the internet becoming widespread and more important to everyday commerce and communication, organizations such as Movement for an Open Web argue services like browsers should be regulated similarly to other public utilities. Said co-founder James Roswell, quote, "We must separate the core functionality of browsers, providing web access, from other ancillary services that populate the web. Ownership of browsing must be strictly separated from the provision of those services to prevent the type of vertical integration that has enabled the current dominant structure." End quote. Other demands include implementing technical standards for browsers and encouraging interoperability with other web functions such as authentication and AI. With privacy/consumer-based legislation passing in recent years, like the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act in the UK, the idea of internet browser regulation becomes more likely, something for podcasting to keep in mind as their core podcast apps are themselves bespoke internet browsers.
Last Friday, from Dave Taylor at Adweek, as the advertising industry breathes a sigh of relief over the death of third-party cookies being called off, Taylor takes a look at similar hype cycles in the history of online advertising and how the sky has yet to truly fall in the industry. A quote from Taylor, quote, "The path to where we are today gave the industry plenty of time to fret, both in conference rooms and industry opinion columns. But amid this fretting, many within our industry failed to acknowledge that our industry has weathered its fair share of shakeups over the last couple of decades, and has continued to push forward as strong as ever," end quote. Notable versions of such shakeups include the CAN-SPAM Act passing in 2003, evolving the nature of email marketing. 2 decades later, 18% of companies report their email marketing ROI is greater than $70 per $1 invested. FTC endorsement guidelines, first published in 2009, then updated last year, have not brought the burgeoning influencer marketing industry to its knees. One of the most widespread impacts is that of the 2021 Apple App Tracking Transparency Update, which requires users to give consent to third-party tracking. Having survived everything from browser ad blockers to GDPR, the advertising industry should take a step back to recognize that things like cookies are a tool, not a strategy that can be substituted for good data practices or marketing plans.
Finally, it's time for our quick hits. These are articles that didn't quite make the cut for today's episode, but are still worth including in your weekend reading. This week, Megaphone is now IAB certified. An email sent by Spotify announces their Megaphone platform is now IAB Podcast Measurement version 2.2 certified. Cannes Lions and possible acquisitions reflect growing optimism in the ad industry. 2 huge business-to-business legacies finding buyers shows the strength of in-person B2B events. Podcast Advertising Benchmarks Q2 2024. Magellan AI publishes the latest data from over 100,000 podcast episodes monitored by the company directly and for clients. Acast sees sustained growth improve EBITDA in Q2 2024. The company says it is on track to be EBITDA profitable by the end of the year. Spotify could soon get its own Gemini extension, and here's how it would work, by Hadley Simmons. The new extension will allow voice assistant users to ask Gemini to play songs and podcasts, though it's unknown how this will be reported back to the podcast hosts.
And that was The Download, brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know we went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or on the download section of soundsprofitable.com. And thank you for sticking with us as we bring you the top stories you might have missed from the past week. I'm Newton Shuttlecotty.
And I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. Special thanks to Spreaker for hosting The Download, and thanks to you for joining us. Robot.
Download complete.